Hey everyone, let me kick things off with a question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you were cheated on? Maybe you caught them red-handed, stumbled upon some incriminating texts, or had a friend break the news. Many of us have been through something like this, but my story has a unique twist. It wasn't a hidden message or a stray lipstick mark that revealed my wife's affair. Believe it or not, it was my German Shepherd who uncovered the truth. Before I get into the details, let me introduce myself. I'm an ordinary guy with a stable job, who does his best to support his family and be a good husband and father. I have 2 kids who are everything to me, and until recently, I thought we had a pretty solid life. Isn't it always the case that you think everything is going well until something unexpected shakes it all up? My wife, let's call her Sarah, she's beautiful, and I won't deny it. The kind of woman who can turn heads without even trying. And yeah, I used to be proud of that. She had this energy, this charm that drew people in. We had our issues, of course, money fights, the usual disagreements that come with a long marriage, but I never thought it would come to this. I never thought she'd betray me like that. Now, here's where things get wild. It was just a regular day. I came home from work, tired, probably thinking about what to make for dinner or what show to zone out on. Then there's Max, my German Shepherd, trotting into the room like he always does. Only this time, he wasn't bringing me one of his toys or a random stick he found in the yard. No, this time, Max had something else in his mouth. It was a used condom. A filled condom. I just stood there, frozen, staring at it as if I couldn't believe my own eyes. I mean, what the hell was I looking at? Max was wagging his tail, proud of his find, but I could feel the blood drain from my face. It was unmistakable, the thing was used, tied off, and packed with someone else's, well, you get the idea. And it sure as hell wasn't mine. My mind started racing, piecing it all together. While I was out there busting my ass at work, some other guy had been here, in my house, in my bed. And here was the proof, dripping from the edges of that condom like a slap in the face. Now, most guys would have lost it right there, screamed, thrown things, maybe even packed up and left. But not me. That's not how I handle things. I don't panic, I don't make a scene. I plan. So, instead of blowing up in rage, I did something else, something that I'd been planting in my head the moment I saw that thing in Max's mouth. I took the condom from him and didn't throw it away. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, thinking about what to do. What's the best way to handle this? How do I make her pay, but on my terms? That's when the idea hit me. I'd make her a milkshake, 2 milkshakes, actually, one for me and one for her, but hers would be a little extra. I dropped the condom into the blender, a used condom filled with semen, and blended it right into the milkshake like it was just another ingredient. I know it's sick, but at that moment, all I could think about was payback. I wanted her to swallow the same disgusting betrayal she'd been feeding me. I wanted her to taste what she'd been doing behind my back. Once they were ready, I called her into the kitchen. "Hey babe, made you a milkshake," I said as calmly as ever. She had no idea. She took the glass from my hand, smiling like everything was fine, like she wasn't sneaking some other guy into our bed whenever I was gone. She took a sip, and immediately her face scrunched up. "This tastes weird," she said, her eyes narrowing as if she could tell something was off. I just smiled and leaned back against the counter. "It's a secret ingredient," I told her, keeping my voice steady as if it were no big deal. She laughed and took another sip. "What is it?" she asked, still smiling, still oblivious. "That's why it's a secret," I said, watching her down the drink. She had no idea what she was drinking, no idea what I knew. I sat down on the couch afterward, flipping on the TV like nothing had happened. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I knew I had to keep it together. This wasn't the time for a confrontation, not yet. I wasn't about to explode and give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten to me. I wasn't just thinking about revenge, I was thinking about the long game. Because let's be honest, the moment I made that shake, I knew our marriage was done. I knew I was going to file for divorce, but it wasn't enough to end it. I needed to win. I needed to make sure that when the dust settled, I'd be the one standing with the kids. That's what mattered most to me, my children. And if I wasn't careful, the court would hand them over to her. Why? Because our incomes are about the same, and let's face it, the system is rigged for the moms. She'd play the victim card, bat her eyelashes, and walk away with the house, the kids, and everything else. I couldn't let that happen. So, I stayed calm. I waited. I played the part of the loving husband, even as she drank down that disgusting milkshake without a second thought. This was just the beginning. She didn't know it, but her world was about to come crashing down, and when it did, I'd be ready. The real game had only just started. After what I did with the milkshake, I knew I couldn't let my emotions get the better of me. This wasn't about quick revenge or some petty confrontation. I was playing for keeps, and the stakes were high, my kids, my life. I couldn't let her walk away from this unscathed, especially not after what she'd done. The next move had to be mine, but I needed time and space to execute it properly. So, I decided to take a long vacation from work. Now, I'm not talking about a tropical getaway. No, I told my boss I needed time off to deal with some personal issues, and luckily, I had enough leave saved up to make it happen without raising suspicion. I needed to be out of the house, or at least make it seem like I was, so she wouldn't suspect a thing. Every morning, I'd wake up, dress as if I was going to work, and head out the door. But instead of going to the office, I'd circle back a little while later and slip in through the back entrance. Our house has a side door that's barely noticeable, perfect for sneaking in unnoticed. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. On the third day of my vacation, I saw with my own eyes that my wife, Sarah, was having her affair right under our roof, in the same bed we shared while I was supposed to be at work. She wasn't even trying to be subtle about it. It was almost like she didn't care if she got caught, as if my work routine was so predictable she thought I'd never catch on. That's when I realized I needed solid proof. Words weren't going to be enough in court. I couldn't rely on a hunch or even the used condom Max had brought me. No, I needed irrefutable evidence to back me up, and that's when I got the idea to install HD cameras. Honestly, I was surprised at how easy it was. These things aren't as expensive or complicated as I thought. A couple of trips to some online shops, and I had everything I needed: tiny, unobtrusive cameras that I could hide in strategic places around the house, the bedroom, the living room, even the hallway where she brought her lover in and out of the house. Setting them up took a little finesse, but once they were in place, it was like I had a front row seat to her lies. But I wasn't done yet. You see, I wasn't just interested in catching her cheating, I wanted to break her down psychologically, and I wanted to be smart about it. Divorce courts can be tricky, and I knew she'd try to paint herself as the victim. So I needed her to come off as unstable. That's when I started nudging her toward her therapist more frequently. Sarah had been seeing a psychologist on and off for a while, mostly for stress and anxiety, nothing too serious, but enough for me to know there was a vulnerability I could exploit. I started planting little seeds, manipulating situations to make her feel like she needed those sessions more. I'd create arguments out of nothing, push her buttons just enough to make her feel on edge. Sometimes I'd mention how concerned I was for her mental health, how I thought it might be a good idea for her to see the psychologist more regularly. Other times, I'd bring up old issues from our marriage, making her feel like maybe she was the problem, suddenly pushing her towards self-doubt. It wasn't hard, she was already fragile, and I knew exactly where to apply pressure. It worked. Soon enough, she was booking more appointments, convinced that the increased stress in her life had nothing to do with her own actions but was somehow tied to our marriage. Perfect. While all this was happening, I wasn't sitting on my hands. I'd already contacted a lawyer, a good one. I didn't want just any run-of-the-mill divorce attorney. I wanted someone ruthless, someone who could help me make sure I got what I deserved. When I explained the situation, my lawyer was quick to advise me on what needed to be done. We began documenting everything, every bit of evidence I collected from those hidden cameras, every strange expense on her credit card statements, every late-night trip out of the house. We were building a case, and with every passing day, I was getting closer to my goal. She had no idea what was coming. Sarah thought she was getting away with her affair, and as long as I played dumb, she kept slipping further into her web of lies. But I knew better. I knew this game was mine to win. We were ready. The lawyer and I started preparing for the divorce. All the evidence was being compiled, processed, and documented. There would be no escape for her when the time came. When I finally made my move, it would be with everything I had. And when it was over, I'd make sure my kids were with me, and she would be left with nothing but her lies. This was only the beginning. A few days later, after I installed those cameras, I finally had what I'd been waiting for, a full-on recording of my wife, Sarah, cheating on me in our own bedroom. It wasn't some grainy, unclear footage either, it was high-quality, unmistakable evidence. There was no denying what was happening on that screen. Watching it, I felt a mix of emotions I can't even begin to describe. It wasn't just anger or betrayal, it was like a slow realization that the woman I built my life with was a complete stranger to me. There she was, in the bed we used to share, doing things I didn't even want to picture. It was sickening, but I kept my cool. That's the thing, I never let my emotions control me. I didn't want to blow everything up in a fit of rage. Sure, part of me wanted to send the video to everyone. I knew right then and there that I wanted to burn her world to the ground, but that would have been too easy. I had to wait, be patient, there's no satisfaction in immediate gratification. When it comes to revenge, you have to let it simmer, let the tension build until it snaps at just the right moment. Timing is everything, and I wasn't about to ruin the perfect opportunity by acting too soon. My lawyer had been prepping everything behind the scenes. The paperwork was all in place, and we were ready to move forward the moment I gave the signal. I knew I had to strike when it would hit her hardest, when she'd feel the full weight of her choices. So I waited just a little longer. Every day felt like a countdown, and I could see it in her eyes that she had no clue what was coming. She went about her life as if everything was normal, sleeping in the same bed with me, making small talk like nothing was wrong. The audacity of it all was unbelievable. Then, when everything was perfectly set, I hit send. The video went out to all our mutual friends, every last one of them. There were no explanations, no context, just raw footage. I didn't need to say anything, the video spoke for itself. Within minutes, my phone started blowing up. People were shocked, some couldn't believe it, others were disgusted, and a few of them reached out to me expressing their sympathy. It didn't take long for the news to spread like wildfire. Her little perfect world was collapsing, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I didn't want any more attention than necessary, but I needed people to know who she really was. I needed her to feel the weight of what she'd done. The looks, the whispers, she'd become a pariah overnight. People who thought she was this loving, doting wife now knew the truth, and it shattered any illusion she'd built around herself. Once the video was out, I didn't waste any time. I went straight to her and told her flat out that I was filing for divorce. Her reaction was priceless. She stood there frozen for a moment, like she couldn't believe what was happening. I'll never forget the look on her face, her eyes wide with shock, her lips parting as if she was trying to form words but couldn't. And then, when the reality hit her, she snapped. She exploded in anger, calling me every name in the book. "Urine," she screamed, her voice shaking with fury. "I never loved you, not once." I just stood there, watching her unravel. Her words didn't hurt me, not anymore. I'd already checked out emotionally by then. I knew what she was trying to do. She wanted to lash out, to make me feel something, to get under my skin. But it didn't work. I wasn't the one losing here. I simply looked at her, calm as ever, and said, "Doesn't matter now. We'll settle this in court." That shut her up for a second. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to turn this around. But deep down, I think she already knew there was no coming back from this. The divorce was happening, and she was about to lose everything. Now let me tell you about the court process. You might think divorce court is this somber, stressful experience, but for me, it was actually pretty damn satisfying. Walking into that courtroom, I felt like I had all the power. I was fully prepared, and my lawyer was ruthless. We went over every single detail beforehand, strategizing, making sure there were no loose ends. By the time we sat down in front of the judge, I knew exactly how this was going to play out. First off, I laid it all out there. I didn't hold back. I talked at length about her infidelity, of course, but I also brought up her mental health struggles. I don't mean in a way that made me look like an uncaring husband, no, I framed it as concern. I told the court how I'd been worried about her for a long time, how she'd been seeing a psychologist regularly, and how her behavior had been increasingly erratic. I was careful to paint myself as the stable, caring parent, the one who was looking out for the best interests of our children. Then came the piece de resistance, the video. The same video I'd sent to our friends. I played it in court for everyone to see. The room went silent as it played, there was no denying what was on that screen. You could hear a pin drop by the time it ended. Sarah was sitting there, white as a sheet, unable to say anything. That's when she tried to flip the script. "He's a criminal," she yelled, standing up in the courtroom. "He distributed that video without my consent. He violated my privacy." Her voice was shrill and desperate, as if she thought she could somehow turn the tables and make me look like the bad guy. But I was ready for this. Calmly, I explained that I'd been hacked, that someone had stolen the video from my personal files and distributed it without my knowledge. I had the paperwork to prove it. That same day, I had filed a police report about a fraud incident. I even had the report that detailed how someone had stolen $542 from my account. I presented it all in court, making it look like I was just as much a victim of this as she was. It worked. The judge couldn't pin the video leak on me, and Sarah looked like she was grasping at straws. I completely outmaneuvered her. She thought she could paint herself as the victim, but I'd played the long game, and it paid off. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. I got full custody of the kids. She could see them only by agreement and only under supervision. She lost the house, the respect of her friends, and everything she thought she could rely on. As for me, I walked out of that courtroom knowing I had won. I had my kids, my life, and my dignity intact. Sarah had nothing but the wreckage of her own choices to deal with. I couldn't have been more satisfied. In the end, it wasn't just about the divorce, it was about taking control of my life again, and damn, did it feel good. Things have been going pretty smoothly since the divorce. I had custody of the kids, my life was getting back on track, and for the most part, Sarah seemed to fade into the background like the bad memory she was. I figured she'd lick her wounds and maybe try to rebuild whatever life she could from the wreckage of our marriage. I even allowed myself to hope that this might finally be over. But that was wishful thinking. Turns out she wasn't done with me yet. It all started when I got a call from my lawyer out of the blue. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, the kind of tone that immediately makes your stomach drop. "We've got a situation," he said. Apparently, Sarah had filed a motion to reopen the custody case, claiming that the original proceedings were unfair. That wasn't all, she was accusing me of manipulating the court and painting her as unstable to win custody. But the kicker? She was now accusing me of emotionally abusing her and the kids during our marriage. I sat there, listening to the details, trying to make sense of it. It felt like a bad dream. She was alleging that I'd used my influence over the legal process to rig the divorce, and worse, she was fabricating stories of abuse, claiming I'd neglected the kids, that I'd been verbally abusive, and that I'd manipulated them to hate her. None of it was true, of course, but the fact that she was willing to go that low, it was almost surreal. I hung up the phone, my head spinning. It wasn't about custody anymore, not really. This was her revenge. She couldn't handle the fact that she'd lost, so now she was coming at me with everything she had left, no matter how insane or destructive. It wasn't just an attack on me, it was an attempt to drag the kids through another legal battle. This time, she was playing dirty, real dirty. I went straight into preparation mode. I met with my lawyer, and we started to lay out a defense strategy. The thing is, we already had everything we needed, all the evidence from the divorce, the recordings, the video, the police report, all of it was still intact. But now I had to defend myself from these new claims, which meant going through every single detail of our past life together and tearing apart our lies. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, Sarah didn't hesitate to make her new accusations public. She started telling anyone who would listen that I had manipulated the legal system, that I was controlling, abusive, and unfit to be a father. She was painting this picture of me as the monster in her story, and to be honest, I wasn't even surprised. After everything she'd done, it was clear she'd stop at nothing to ruin me, even if it meant dragging herself down in the process. Then came the court. Walking into that courtroom again felt different this time. The first time, I was angry, determined to win and prove her wrong. Now, I was just tired of her games, tired of the lies, tired of the way she was weaponizing the system against me. But I knew I had no choice. This was another battle, and I had to fight it for my kids. She was sitting there, all smug and composed, like she actually believed her own story. Her lawyer made her sound like a victim of some grand manipulation scheme, claiming I had exploited her mental health struggles to make her look bad, that I'd orchestrated the entire case against her to alienate her from our children. She even pulled out the abuse card, saying I had emotionally abused her for years, undermining her confidence and controlling her life. It was disgusting, but I kept my cool. When it was my turn, I laid everything out again. I went over the video evidence of her affair, the months of lies, the way she had prioritized her affair over the family. Then I addressed the allegations of abuse. I didn't just deny them, I obliterated them. I had witnesses, records, even the kids' school reports showing how much better off they'd been since I took custody. The psychological reports from her own therapist helped too. They painted her as the one struggling with control and instability, not me. Then we hit her where it hurt. I brought up the police report from the day I'd allegedly leaked the video of her affair. I showed how I had filed for fraud that very day, proving my story that someone had hacked my account and stolen money. It wasn't hard to tie that end to the claim that the video had been distributed without my consent. That shut down her whole argument that I'd broken the law by sending the video. The judge listened carefully, but by the end, it was clear that Sarah had overplayed her hand. Her new accusations fell apart under scrutiny, and once again, she was left scrambling to explain herself. Her lawyer tried to spin the story, but there was nothing left to twist. When the final ruling came down, the judge saw through everything. The court upheld the original custody arrangement, full custody to me with limited supervised visitation for her. There was no sympathy left for her in that courtroom. In fact, the judge even reprimanded her for wasting the court's time with unfounded accusations. It was over. As I walked out of the courtroom, I didn't feel the same satisfaction I had the first time. It wasn't a victory this time, it was just survival. Sarah had tried to take everything from me again, and she'd failed. But at what cost? The damage she'd done to our kids by dragging them through this chaos, the chaos she'd caused in their lives, was irreversible. She destroyed whatever chance she had left of being a real mother to them, and to me. I'd won again, but I was done playing her game. After the final court battle, life started to feel like mine again. There was a strange kind of peace that settled over the house once everything was said and done. No more court dates, no more late-night legal consultations, and no more dealing with Sarah's toxic games. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. I threw myself into work, and it paid off. Within a few months, I was promoted, something I hadn't expected. The extra money didn't hurt, but more than that, it gave me a sense of control over my life again. Things were finally starting to fall into place. The kids were doing better, too. They were getting used to the new routine, spending time with me during the week and seeing their mother only during supervised visits. I made it a point to keep them busy, family game nights, trips to the park, and even cooking together. I wanted them to feel that, despite all the upheaval, their home life was stable. I also started going out more, cautiously dipping my toes back into the dating scene. At first, I was hesitant. Trust doesn't come easy when you've been burned like I have, but I was taking things slow. That's when I met Lisa. She was everything Sarah wasn't: down to earth, kind, and, most importantly, she didn't play games. There was no drama, no manipulation, she was just real. We clicked immediately, but I kept my guard up, wary of rushing into anything. She was patient, never pushing me for more than I was ready to give, and over time, I started to realize that not all relationships were destined to turn toxic. Things were looking up for me, but Sarah's life was a different story entirely. Right after the court decision, Sarah jumped into a new relationship. I figured she'd try to move on quickly. She was always the type to need someone around to validate her, so I wasn't surprised. But the guy she hooked up with was bad news. Rumor had it he was as controlling as she was. It didn't take long before I started hearing stories from mutual acquaintances about their explosive arguments in public, how he'd embarrass her in front of people, and how their relationship seemed to be spiraling out of control. It was ironic, really. For years, Sarah had controlled every aspect of our marriage, manipulating me, gaslighting me, always making me feel like I was the problem. And now she'd found herself in the same situation, only this time she was on the receiving end of the toxicity. At first, I didn't care what she did with her life, it wasn't my problem anymore. Honestly, I felt a certain satisfaction knowing that she was finally reaping what she'd sown. But as time went on, her chaotic relationship started impacting the kids. When she had her supervised visits, she'd talk to them about her new boyfriend, trying to present him as some great guy. The kids weren't buying it. They'd seen enough of her instability and knew better than to get attached to another one of her bad decisions. One day, after she'd missed yet another visit, my youngest asked me, "Dad, why doesn't Mom come to see us anymore?" I could hear the confusion and hurt in his voice, and it hit me hard. I knew Sarah's new relationship was taking priority over everything else in her life, including her children. She wasn't showing up for them, too wrapped up in her own mess to care about the damage she was doing, and the damage was starting to show. Sarah and her new boyfriend were constantly in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons: public arguments, rumors of cheating on both sides, and drama that spilled out into their social circles. It became obvious that she was in over her head. The guy wasn't just bad for her, he was destroying what little she had left of her life. She tried to flaunt the relationship in my face in the beginning, as if it were some kind of victory, but now it was clear to everyone that she had made another colossal mistake. I get messages from friends asking if I'd heard about her latest meltdown or if I'd seen the latest post she put on social media, where she'd gone from over-the-top declarations of love for her boyfriend to cryptic, bitter posts about being betrayed and lied to. It was a train wreck, and she was driving it straight off the rails. Meanwhile, my life was steady. I wasn't interested in drama, and I made sure to keep my kids away from the chaos that surrounded Sarah. I focused on them, on my new relationship with Lisa, and on my work. The more I thrived, the worse Sarah seemed to spiral. Then, one night, I got a call from her. It was late, and I almost didn't pick up, but something told me to answer. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying, and she tried to sound casual at first, talking about how she wanted to see the kids more and how she missed them. But then it shifted. She started talking about how hard things had been for her, how she felt trapped in her relationship with this guy, and how she didn't know where else to turn. It was almost pathetic hearing her like that. The strong, manipulative woman who had once held so much power over me was now broken, lost in her own choices. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a bigger part of me knew that this was the path she'd chosen. She was reaping what she had sown. I kept the conversation short, told her that her access to the kids was strictly through the agreed visitation rights, and that was that. When I hung up, I felt a strange sense of closure. Sarah's life was unraveling, and for once, it wasn't my problem to fix. I had my kids, my stability, and for the first time in a long time, I had my peace. As for Sarah, she was left with the mess she made, and from what I could tell, there was no coming back from it. The weeks after that late-night call from Sarah were strangely quiet: no more drama, no more messages, no more chaos. I'd heard through the grapevine that her relationship with the guy had finally blown up in spectacular fashion. It was inevitable. She had burned through all her chances, both with me and with anyone else. Now she was on her own, and I couldn't help but feel relieved. My life, in contrast, was steady. The kids were doing great, thriving really. They were settled into the new normal, and I could see how much happier they were now that the constant tension and instability were gone. We had found a rhythm, a routine that worked, and they knew that they could count on me. As for me, I was finally at peace. Lisa and I had grown closer, and for the first time in years, I was in a relationship that wasn't about manipulation or control. It was about trust and understanding. We weren't rushing into anything, and I wasn't putting pressure on myself to make it perfect. It just felt right, and after everything I'd been through, that was enough. One night, once the kids were tucked in and the house had fallen silent, I sank into the living room couch, reflecting on how far I had come. It was surreal to think about the wreckage that had been my marriage to Sarah. In a sense, it felt like a different era, as if the man who had endured that toxic relationship was a stranger to me now. Yet, I knew that part of him was still a part of me. Everything that had transpired, both the good and the bad, had shaped who I was. The betrayals, the lies, and the endless games had all left their marks, but here I was, standing strong on the other side. I realized it wasn't just about winning in court or securing custody of the kids or witnessing Sarah's downfall. It was about reclaiming my life, bit by bit. It was about learning to trust myself again and recognizing that I deserved better than what I had settled for. It was about moving forward, not merely surviving. I no longer took any satisfaction in Sarah's misfortunes. I didn't harbor anger or bitterness towards her. Ultimately, I felt pity for her. She had made her choices and was facing the consequences, but I couldn't let her narrative dictate mine any longer. My story was now about healing, rebuilding, and the quiet victories, the small, often unseen moments that signify a gradual improvement in life. It was about being a devoted father, becoming a better man, and finding happiness on my own terms. So, where does this leave me? Honestly, it's a place I never imagined I'd reach, a place of peace. I've come to understand that life doesn't always follow the script you plan, but it's your response to the setbacks that defines you. Sarah's betrayal could have shattered me, but it didn't. Instead, it propelled me to take control of my life. Now, I look ahead with hope, not just for myself but for my kids and the new family we've built from the remnants of what was. The past is behind me, and I've finally rediscovered something I thought I had lost, myself. And that, more than anything, is the true victory.